Thank you for coming out tonight. Once again, we're into the next month, first Wednesday evening in September here, so getting into some nice fall weather and beautiful time of year. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jake Byler. I have been a part of these meetings for a good number of years. Actually started about when Eli did with investing, so we've been on this journey together for quite a while. But this group has just always existed for local education, connection, just investors to get together, business owners to get together, to learn, to be inspired, to grow, and to share information. So that is why we're here. I'll give a quick shout out to our sponsors for 2025. We've got 6 sponsors that pay our expenses for the year. They are Sam Glick with Redbox Dumpsters, Chet Lapp, Providence Abstracting Company, Ben Yoesh, who's a local realtor, Jeff Moeller does some private lending, Joe Liofsky, Compass Property Management, and Sammy Stolzfus with Mill Run Storage. So big thanks to those guys for being sponsors. If you are not on our email list and you would like to be, there's a paper on the table in the back that tells you how you can get on there. And if you or someone that you know does not have access to email or even to the meetings or to the videos that we do, there's also, I think about a half a year ago now, Kevin Hoover and his son set this up, that there's a call-in recording number. You can call in. You cannot listen to the meetings live, but you can call in usually a couple of days or a week later and listen to the meeting. If you know of someone that would appreciate that, that information is on the table in the back as well. So we don't have a whole lot of other stuff to go over tonight. I do have a very quick, I guess it could be called a market update, but it's not really that. For you short-term rental hosts, Airbnb hosts, you probably saw, we might talk about this a little bit more next month, but you probably saw that they are changing some fee structures. I didn't dive into it deeply, but it looks like they are making a change where all of the fees are going to be on the host side. So if you're hosting a property, you want to be aware of that. It's my understanding they're going to put a 15.5% fee that's going to be paid entirely by the host. So all that really means for us is that we need to adjust our prices probably 15.5%. Actually, maybe not quite that because we were paying a couple percent before. So anyway, if you're an Airbnb host and you're not aware of that, look it up. I don't know why they're doing this, but if I understand it right, the email that I got said, if you use a property management software, that change takes place October 27th. And if you don't, it'll be in December of this year. Not sure why that is, but something to be aware of if you're a short-term rental host or specifically on Airbnb. So we are going to jump in. I'll tell you a little bit about our speaker for tonight, Eli King. I don't know that Eli needs a whole lot of an introduction with this group. He has been around longer than the group has been around. Many of you have heard him speak probably multiple times. Eli has been buying and selling and flipping properties, mostly in Lancaster County, but also some surrounding areas since about 2010. And he's just gotten really, really good at what he does. And he's also gotten really, really good at talking about it and sharing strategies and inspiring people to do the same. So the topic for tonight, if you've got the email or you probably know what the topic is, it's on the screen behind me here, how to buy real estate with little or no money down in 2025. So I don't know how about you guys, but every time that I hear the topic or the pitch of like how to buy real estate with no money down, I actually cringe a little bit. And I'll tell you why. There's 2 reasons actually. Oftentimes it is associated with a heavy sales pitch and somebody is going to be selling something. There's something about the, you can do this with no money that appeals to us, right? It's like you're getting something for nothing, and we know that's not how life works. So that's one of the reasons that I actually don't really like the topic, but I'll give you some reasons why I do like it as well. And the other thing that actually really bothers me when there's like people hard selling the how to buy real estate with no money down, what happens is it appeals to people that, I mean, okay, if you're 18 years old or 20 years old, this might be different. But I have seen it happen way too many times where it appeals to people that are well into their adult life and they have not yet developed healthy financial habits and they don't have any money to invest. And that, I have never seen it work well when someone like that goes after the no money down strategy. I hope that's making sense to you, because I've seen that happen a lot. And this is not what we're doing tonight, obviously, but there's many people that put on events and sell courses and just drain people of what little finances they have, because they sell them on, you can do all this without any of your own money. The reality is you can, and Eli will show you many examples of how he has done that. But if it's someone that has not yet developed sound financial habits and got financially healthy, it will be much, much more difficult. So just kind of a disclaimer there. The reason I do like the topic is because it's an absolutely powerful way to buy real estate, and it happens all the time. It doesn't happen as easy as sometimes we wish it would, but if you're in the business long enough and you do it enough, well, Eli will show us some examples. It's a really, really powerful way of buying real estate if you can make it work and all of that. So anytime you hear a guy like Eli talking, it's just a reality. You hear somebody that's been doing it for a while, and it's like, well, yeah, it's easy for him. Of course, Eli can do it. You know, he knows all this stuff, and he makes it look easy. But I'm going to tell you two quick stories just so that you know that when Eli started, he didn't know all this stuff. He started the same place that we all do, and he did not know what he was doing when he started, which most of us don't. When Eli got into it, he started flipping houses, and I mean, the margins were thin back then. We scratched and we clawed and we worked to turn a $5,000 or an $8,000 profit on a house. And Eli has told this story here. Some of you guys probably remember it. One of the first ones that he did, got the house done, of course, probably spent more than he wanted to, got it on the market. You know, finally they get an offer. His realtor comes over and they sit down and they're going over the numbers, and you know, it's looking like we might actually scratch out a little profit here. And then his realtor explains to him that they're asking for $3,000 seller help, also known as seller assistance or seller concession, but I think he phrased it as seller help. And Eli gets this confused look on his face, and he's like, why are they asking me for help? Isn't their realtor helping them? Like, why don't their realtor help them? Why are they asking me to help? I mean, it's a common thing back then, but Eli didn't know what it means. So I think he ended up helping them in that way and getting the house sold and ending up with a couple $1,000s of profit. And the other thing, which is, I just think this is a funny story. After Eli and his wife got married, moved into this nice little rental property, renting from an Amishman, and I think about halfway through the first month, the landlord comes over and he's doing a little work around there, or at least he's trying to do a little work around there. And soon he says something about the rent for this month, and Eli is confused because he was going to pay the rent at the end of the month. Growing up, all that Eli was used to with their family was paying interest payments. And most of you know, I don't know why this is that way. Maybe there's a reason, maybe there's not. But if you borrow money and you're paying interest, that is usually due at the end of the month. If you're renting a house from someone, that's always due on the first of the month. But Eli didn't know that, so he was going to pay his landlord at the end of the month. But he promptly took care of the rent that day, and I don't think he was ever late again which actually ended up being one of his valuable connections down the road as he was doing some of the stuff that he is going to talk about tonight. So Eli's going to come up in just a minute here. Another thing I think is important to think about, a lot of times when we have someone like this talking, so Eli is here. Eli is actually a really good speaker and a presenter, but he's not here as a professional speaker. He is here as a local real estate investor, business owner, flipper, all of that has learned how to do that really well. And so he's getting invited into sharing some of what he's learned, which he loves to do. And I just think it's important to remember that, you know, the goal for us tonight as we learn from Eli is not necessarily to try to pattern exactly what Eli has done. Probably if you were trying to copy his methods and his journey exactly, it's probably not going to work. But what I do believe is that as you listen to his stories, as you just kind of lean into what he's talking about, some of the concepts, some of the methods, some of the principles, maybe more importantly, I think there will be a lot that you can learn that you can apply to your situation, and you can be inspired and pick up some new fun things as we learn together this evening. So Eli has bought lots and lots of properties since 2010. He's sold a bunch, he flips a bunch. I don't know of any local investors that are more active and more in tune to the local market and have been more creative and just consistent in doing what he does. So I'm excited to learn from Eli tonight. Let's give him a big welcome as he comes up. There you go.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate the warm welcome. We have a clicker here. There we go. So yeah, I'm grateful to be here. Grateful for the opportunity to speak tonight, and so I want to thank all of you for coming out. It's a beautiful evening. You could have been at home working in the garden or getting caught up on some chores, and instead of that, you chose to come out here to learn. So I appreciate your coming out. Well, my goal here tonight is for you to learn and to grow and to be inspired. Like Jake mentioned, we're all on an individual journey. Like, our journeys are going to look different, but I'm a big believer in that we can learn from each other. And that is my goal here tonight, is to share stories in a way that you can relate to. And yeah, my goal is to just share and inspire. So with that, let's jump right in. So I just remember one of the reasons that I talk a lot about this topic, how to buy real estate with no money down, is it's a topic that I'm really passionate about. I get a lot of questions from investors who want to get started, and they're just a little bit at a loss of what we're going to do to get that ball rolling. And I know exactly where they're coming from, and I will never forget my roots. I will never forget how it felt to get started in the beginning. It was a hard journey. I had spent my life pretty much just always behind the ball financially. Our parents they were always struggling financially. And by the time I was 21 years old, I was pretty tired of it. I just felt there had to be a better way. But how? I didn't really know how. And so when I get questions from a young investor, somebody that wants to change their future for the better, I get really excited about sharing everything I know. So that is my goal here tonight, and partly why, get out of my comfort zone and all that stuff. So yeah, I remember back when I started, I didn't really know, do I have what it takes to win? Is there anyone here that wonders, do I have what it takes to win? I want to buy real estate for no money down. I want to get in on that appreciation stuff. I want to get in on that rental cash flow stuff. And do you sometimes wonder? So I have news for you. Everyone in this room is a winner. You came out tonight because you're serious about learning. And you're going to learn from real life experience. You're going to learn from hard-earned experience. And yes, I just applaud each of you for coming out. And just to remove all doubt, I'm going to have each one of you stand up, and we're going to point to your neighbor, and we're going to say, "You are a winner." All right? So let's do it. You are a winner. All right, great. So now that we've all established that everyone in this room is a winner, let's talk about what winners do. So what do winners do? How do they act? Winners pay the price, just a little bit more. You're doing that tonight. You're coming out, spending your couple hours in a room, spending time getting here, and you could be out, relaxing or whatever. But no, you're paying the price. You're getting out. You're learning, and that makes you a winner right there. Winners hold themselves accountable to the results. If there's something in your life that you don't like, maybe it's your small checkbook balance or whatever, and you're out to change that, and you know that what you've been doing so far, hasn't changed it, and you're here to change it tonight. That means you're paying attention to the numbers, and winners hold themselves accountable to the numbers, and they adjust accordingly. I remember when I was 21 years old, I could have looked at life and I could have said, that's just life. It's always hard. It always is difficult, and it always is going to be that way. But I believed in a better future. I believed that if I applied myself to do the best I could and asked for help, that I could get something started. And it has been quite a journey. But I don't believe it would have happened if I would have just said, it's always going to be hard. If I wouldn't have, looked at the numbers and said something has to change. So winners understand that nobody succeeds alone. When I got started, I was probably one of the most persistent people that these old people had seen in a while. I would ask questions, and I would ask for help, and I would ask for money, and I would ask for rehab help, and I would ask for more money, and I was probably a little bit too heavy on asking for help, but I got it that I can't move the needle by myself, and that's true to this day. There might be some good things happening in my life, and I'm going to tell you that nothing happens alone. Anything that our team has accomplished has been a team effort, all the way from realtors, finding deals. I have an assistant now who really has picked up a lot of my slack, and I want to thank Josiah. He's not here tonight, but he took some of my ideas I just scratched out on a piece of paper and made this slide in a way that you can kind of follow after and learn from. So as we learn how to be good winners, let's win together, and just remember that they never succeed alone. Winners never quit learning. You're already here learning more, so I think you already get that principle. But winners are always open to a good idea. They're always open to acknowledging that somebody knows maybe a better way than what they've been used to, and they are open to adapting accordingly. So yeah, let's see what happens now. I think I'm going the wrong way. There we go. So I don't know where I was the last 15 years, but I just recently came across this quote, and I thought it was pretty good. Your dreams won't work unless you do too. So I kind of like that. There's a lot of truth in there, and I decided to include that in the presentation when I got a call last week from an investor friend that I know. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago, and he had run into some hard situations, and he gave me some words of wisdom that I thought I would share with the group tonight. And so he said, I guess he come from a place where he thought that maybe there's a shortcut to success. And he said, Eli, he said, I have a problem with your meetings. He said, I feel there's too many speakers that show up and they talk about how many units they have, and you get in your head that having more units is going to fix all your problems. And he said, I was at an event recently and they said, there are no shortcuts to true success. Every true success is bought with blood, sweat, and tears, and there are no shortcuts. And I thought that was really good. I also thought it was a good point that he brought out about getting in your head that you need to have a certain amount of units to be successful. I thought that was pretty good. He said, so what if you have 500 units and you're stressed out and you're like at risk of losing half of them, and you're 20% of them are vacant? And he said, is that guy better off than the guy that has 10 rentals that are paid off? And I said, no. And so anyway, he and I had a great discussion for like 30 minutes. And I just wanted to point that out there because he had some good points. And it really tied in with this quote, your dreams won't work unless you do too. No shortcuts. So we're going to remember that. I'll repeat it again. True success only comes through hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. His comment on the 10 units or 100 units or whatever just kind of prompted me to make this comment on that. So we sometimes wonder, okay, well, how I want to grow, but how should I grow? How fast should I grow? How much is too much? How fast is too fast? And like Jake mentioned earlier, we're all on a different journey. Like our positions are different for each one of us. And so I think there is no standard answer. So what we have to do is just remember some key points. Don't feel that with 100 units or whatever it is will make your life better if you can't pay your bills with the units you have now, if you can't keep after the units you have now, if you can't keep the units occupied that you have now. If that's happening, you already have too many units and you need to get caught up or otherwise deleverage a little bit or something. So I don't want to say that to discourage anyone from growth or expansion, but just to recognize that it's a trap that we investors can fall into. I am not excluded, okay? So I've had to learn some things the hard way myself. So my advice to you is build your foundation well. In other words, learn what you're good at, learn what works for you, and then build out from there. Build your foundation well, then build, then expand. Pay attention to the numbers and adjust accordingly. So for me, I grew up with my parents weren't able to pay the bills on time every time. And for me, when I was getting started out, I determined that that is my red line. If I can't pay my bills, I will sell properties, I will quit buying properties, whatever I have to do to get to a point where my bills are being paid and my bills are paid after. That's probably one of the reasons that I'm probably one of the best borrowers in the country, or the county rather. I do not pay late, and that came from my early years. So we're going to repeat this again. Your dreams won't work unless you do too. So let's work. Let's work hard. Let's work smart, and let's remember that there are no shortcuts. Having said that, how do you get started? If you're just young, you have maybe no money, maybe you have bought a property and put all your money into that one, and you kind of like it, but you want another one. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So the low or no money down options. There are actually quite a few. I didn't put all of them on here, but one of the most common and most easily accessible ways is the BRRRR method. BRRRR simply stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and then my favorite part, repeat. So how that works is you buy a property that's worth, that's going to be an ARV, that's after repaired value, of approximately 180 to 200,000, and you buy that property for maybe 100 or 110,000, and then you put 35 or 40,000 into it, and you're all in for what, 150, maybe a little more, give or take, and then you get an 80% loan on that, and that's going to come in right around what you have in the property. That is a time-proven strategy that works, and you have to work to find that property that meets that criteria? Absolutely. They're not just out on the street any day of the week, but it works. These properties are out there. Do you have to work to get them in shape? Yes. Do you have to work to find them? Yes. Do you have to work to manage that rehab budget so that you don't end up with more money in than what the bank will lend to you? Yes. It all takes work. But what I like about it is that it's doable. And I have proven that beyond a shadow of doubt. So that is the one method, the BRRRR method. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. Any questions on that method? So Jeff, you get into quite a few of these BRRRR deals as a hard money lender. Do you have any thoughts on what may be the most common challenges with those, or the most common mistake, or something? What should we be thinking about as we think about the BRRRR method?
I would say I don't know if I should stand up. I guess I will. It's either paying too much money or putting too much money into the property and not getting the value that you need to get out of it. As a lender, I always ask the question, what happens if the property doesn't appraise for high enough and the bank doesn't lend you enough? How are you going to make up that difference with the loan? Because my lenders don't want to carry a small second mortgage because you weren't able to borrow enough money. So I always ask the borrower, what's your plan if that doesn't happen? And it better not be have the lender carry a second mortgage.
All right, well, there you heard it from Jeff, the hard money lender. Do not expect the hard money lender to hold a second mortgage. One of the challenges I see with this strategy is a vague or a moving after repaired value. I probably have become a little too comfortable with my assessment of ARVs and probably have gotten quite good at it. The reason that I have a strong level of confidence in my ARVs is because I get my numbers from reputable realtors. I will always ask a realtor what the ARV is, unless it's a street or a market that I do a lot of business in. I kind of know already just from being in the market. But to me, the ARV is a very critical, I would say it's in the top 3 critical pieces as you're doing a BRRRR method. And the reason is exactly what Jeff shared. If I know that my ARV will be 200,000, give or take, I know that I can get up to 160 in that property and cash out with no money down. If it is below that, like let's say the appraisal comes in at 180, the whole plan is kind of ruined at that point. And so you want to try to get as good as you can at determining the true ARV, not what you would like it to be or what you think it should be or whatever. Get really good at determining the ARV. That, to me, I think the most valuable resource can be from a really good realtor. Also market experience if you get some experience, but just for the beginning investor, one wouldn't have that. So make sure you're talking with a realtor that is really good. A second source is your banker. If you have a good local banker, they also know the markets a little bit and can do can give you some good advice. Your really good bankers will actually spend the $20 and do an e-appraisal and tell you what they can lend you on that property. It takes a special banker to put out $20 for a beginning investor, but there are some around. So that to me is one of the most widely available and repeatable no money down options. Again, all you have to do is call a hard money lender and have a bank that will lend to you, which if you have a job or have good credit, you should be able to do that. Lenders like lending to real estate. It's a solid asset, so get pre-approved and then get your hard money lender. Jeff Moeller is one, 717-826-3013. The other one is Dave Wolf, 278-8141. The other one is Ron Shepard, 587-7390. Don't ask me how I know their phone numbers. Another low money down option is owner financing. And how that works is you run across a seller that wants to sell a property, and you ask them, would you let the money in? Well, how do you run across those kind of sellers? And it's really simple. You go down the street to your work project, your house you're flipping, and you look for handwritten for rent signs. If you find a handwritten for rent sign, that is gold. They are self-managing, they are definitely older, and they definitely are on to managing the property. And they probably have got some problems. And you know they have a vacant unit. But seriously, the owner financing method is most times brought out by you asking the question. Most of my seller financing deals have not come across because they just said, Eli, I want to sell the house, and oh, by the way, I don't want any money, just buy the property. It came from me asking. And so that's a little bit uncomfortable to get to that point, but if you have no money and you want to buy the property, believe me, you can get pretty creative. So how that works is you have the property and you have the seller that wants to sell, and you agree on a price, and then you figure out, okay, do they want a down payment? Do they not? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And then you go to closing, and they leave all or most of the money in and get a note or mortgage. That would be right there. So there's a mortgage and a note recorded so that you can't go and sell the property without them getting paid off or refinance without them getting paid off. And then you get the house. That's one way. The other way is to go to the closing but do an installment sale. An installment sale keeps the deed in the seller's name. The installment sales agreement gets recorded so that they can't go and sell the house to somebody else or something crazy like that. It's just that if you don't pay your monthly payments, they can take the house back a lot quicker and easier than if they have transferred the deed to you. The other big benefit to that is if it's a larger property, the installment sales agreement means that you do not have to pay transfer tax until later, which is actually a pretty nice side benefit. And then kind of the third piece there is if you get into a seller financing deal and they're like, I want 10% down, I gotta have it, I'm not selling you the property unless I get 10% down, then what if you have no money? Well, what I did is I said, okay, who has money? And I went to see them. One of the people that I seen, and I'm going to be sharing about this later, is on a property that that I bought. What just happened here? So so we had this seller that wanted to sell a property, and he wanted $50,000 down. I really, really, really wanted the property for reasons I'll share in just a little bit, but I didn't have $50,000. And I said, okay, how are we going to solve that problem? So I went to see my landlord, and he had been watching me, and he had been watching my rents come in, you know, on the first or before. And he had also done well in real estate. So I said, hey, I've got this property that I want to buy, but I need $50,000 down. Would you lend it to me? And he did. So with the combination of the seller holding 90% and the private loan from my landlord, I was able to buy this property for no money down. It took a little bit more work, and the cash flow was also $50 a unit. So like after paying everybody, there was really no money for Eli, and I was okay with that because I had a strategy. I was at that point flipping houses, so I wasn't without income, but my main strategy with this property was appreciation. And another one that I don't have down here, which I should have, but I guess I was in a hurry when I put this together. But one of my other favorite no money down deals is, so I buy a property, a rental property, and maybe you buy it with the BRRRR method, and let's say life happens, right? Next thing you know, you wake up and it's like 6 years has gone by. The property has gone up 30% in value. Well, if you've been managing it well, your rents have gone up, and so now you can what? You can service a bigger loan. So you go to the bank, and my $200,000 property is now worth what's 30%? So my property is now worth $260, and so I can get 80% of $260. So I'll take that $260 and get 80% loan on it, and now I can get some cash out. So I take that cash out, and I go to the market, and I say I like that house, and so I put 20% down on that house. From the money I got from the bank for refinancing, get an 80% loan on the purchase, and I have another property with no money down. There are limits to that. Like if you don't manage your properties well and keep your rents, keep increasing your rents, you can't service a higher debt payment. But if you do your job well, and we are winners, so we do a good job, then you can, with time, you can do this no money down purchase. And that is as repeatable as rental properties that you have. So that's a very powerful method after, let's say, 10 or 15 years of being in business. Okay, moving on here. So, was there anyone in here that was thinking, well, why would a seller let all their money in when they sell a property? Okay, good deal. That is a great question, and I'm going to get into that. So why would a seller let their money in when they sell you a property? Like when I sell a property, I want the money, right? And what we have to understand is that as young investors, as beginning investors, as investors that are expanding, as investors that are looking to grow, we are in a different place than these sellers. A lot of the retiring landlords that do seller financing are simply in a different place than us. We're not out there looking to rip them off or to pull a fast one over them or to otherwise put them in a bad deal or take advantage of them in any way. What we're doing is presenting opportunities that may be a good fit for them. And if they're a retiring landlord, they're getting older, and in a lot of my seller financing cases, one or the other spouse has actually died. And so these people are looking to simplify their life. So they're simply in a different place, and they're not tired of collecting money, but they're tired of managing the property. And that's where we step in, and so let's take a look at some of the advantages that the seller has. They have huge tax savings, and we're going to share some real-life slides on that in just a little bit. The way the tax law works is if you sell a property, and let's say you bought it for $50 and you're selling it for $250, if you just sold it straight out, you would get taxed on the $200 gain. And that's a big amount. But if you sell the property and let the money in other words, through interfinancing to me, you're not taxed on the money that you don't get. You're only taxed on the money that I would pay down. We're going to get into that in just a little bit, but that is one of the number one reasons. Another reason is they get a good return on the money they let in. So if you sold the property for $250, you could go to the bank and get 4.5% from a bank CD, and guess what? I'd be paying a bank 7%. So if we can kind of like meet in the middle, and maybe they get 5 or 5.5, am I happy? You bet. I'm getting a good deal on interest. Are they happy? Yes, they're getting more than the bank CD. We're just literally cutting out the middleman and working, direct, buyer to seller. So they're getting a good return. The third one that is very important as well, and this is big because in any business relationship, a key component is trust and comfort. If we're comfortable working together, we're going to continue working together. And if you have a business transaction where you have a property, that's a big asset, okay? And so you're thinking, well, I'm just, Eli, the beginning real estate investor, why would they trust me with their big asset? And the reason is because, yes, there's a component of trust in you, but they also have security in their property that they're now selling to you. So they're very comfortable with leaving the money in because they know the property very well. They know it has gone from 50 to 250 or whatever, and they just feel that it's going to be pretty secure. There will be some components in place to make sure that it stays secure. You will be putting them on your insurance as the lien holder, so they can ensure that you keep up with insurance. They will be getting a note and mortgage on the property, which gets recorded. So it's not like you can even pull a fast one unless you, I guess, really get creative. But there's a high level of trust there, not only in you, but also in the asset where their money is tied up. And then the fourth one is very important. It's relationships. When we do business, when we winners do business, we do good business. And so we make our payments on time, we do what we say we're going to do, and then they just get to trust us, and there's a relationship that gets built, and you know what? They like it, so they call me when they want to sell house 2, they call me when they want to sell house 3, they call me when they want to sell house 4, and they call me when they want to sell house 5. And they just really learn to like that. The other thing that I think is important for us to remember, so we're getting started, and we're looking to grow, we're looking to expand, and we are totally at a different place than the sellers. But some of these sellers have had these properties for 50 years, and they're 80 years old. They're recognizing that the time is coming close for them to close their books. And they're looking to, again, simplify their life and do basically estate planning. And I usually take a pause when I get into a room with a seller like that, because I think it's a great reminder for me and all of us here in the room to remember that there's going to be a day when we close our books too. So it's just a good reminder for me to always do business in a way that if my books were closed tomorrow, that there would be good surprises that my wife could find. All right, now we talked about seller advantages. Let's talk about buyer advantages. How much time do we have, Jake? Do we have got till midnight?
We got another 7:52.
All right, great. So we have got a lot of time here to talk about about the buyer advantages. No credit check, no loan underwriting, no debt service coverage ratio challenges, no appraisal. You and the seller have just determined the value, so you don't have to pay $500 to some guy that's going to come in with a low number and whatever and just waste your money. You already know what the property is worth, and it's as repeatable as there is opportunity. And what that means in plain English is it's as repeatable as many properties as that seller owns. All right? So I get really excited when we start developing some direct seller relationships. And many times it works out to where we do buy multiple properties from the same owner. One of the other big advantages is the terms are all negotiated by you and the seller. So we are so used to calling the bank and saying, Mr. Banker, I want to buy a property, or I want to loan on this property, I want to refi my BRRRR. What interest are you going to charge me? And he says, 7.1% right now. And I say, okay. And 7.1% is what we pay. Well, when we get to talking direct to a seller, the conversation can be quite different. And I like that because sometimes the seller is really coming from a different place than the bank. And we're going to share some examples on that. But basically, you can determine a common one that I've been using lately is selling the sellers on that I can get them more than a bank CD. And at 5 or 5.5%, I'm tickled. I'm getting a sweet deal as opposed to 7%, and they're getting more than the bank CD. And most times, their loan term is 3 to 5 years, so that rate is going to be pretty steady for them. And for me, the rates have a long way to drop before I'm like paying a higher interest than I would if I were with a bank. So I like how we can just work things out directly and both be flexible. And then of course, number 7, what is the biggest advantage? No money needed, at least most times. So, so why would we get excited about buying property for no money down? Like, okay, so you have a no money down deal, but what's the point, right? And there's barely any cash flow because you have a higher loan amount. What's the deal? Why do we bother? Why do we put in all that effort and then not have much to show for it with monthly cash flow? So I'm going to share a story with you that really struck me, stayed with me, and I never forgot. So when I was 12 years old, 10 or 12 years old, and right around 98-ish, there was a farm sold in our neighborhood, and my dad and our neighbor stopped in, and my dad and the neighbor talking about how this farm just brought some crazy number. And there are some things that never change because I've heard they still do the same thing these days. And they were talking about, this is just epishunch how much this farm brought. And so the next thing that the neighbor said, his name is Joe T., and he said, John, I bet you could sell your farm for $500,000. And he was a guy that had Red Man in his pocket, and so he would I don't know if it's just my imagination, but he spit a big wad right then, just for emphasis. and I was there, and I was like, I don't think I did it for real, but in my mind was spinning. I was like, no, because I knew my dad had paid $187 for the farm in 1979, built a dairy barn and a small addition to the house. So he was all in for $250. And now Joe T was saying that this farm is worth $500,000. I was like, that is crazy. Furthermore, I knew that my parents owed about $200,000 on the property. And so I was like trying to figure this out, because we had a farm that was worth $500,000. We owed $200,000, but yet the payments weren't getting made every month. I was like, something's disconnected here. And so later I asked my dad about it. I said, are we rich or are we not? And he said, yeah. He said, we have, got some equity in the farm. I said, well, why can't we make something out of it? And he said, well, the dairy, the milk price isn't high enough to have cash flow that the bank needs to do a bigger loan. And he says, if we sold the farm, then what would we do? And yeah, we didn't want to sell the farm. I love being a farmer. I thought that's, what I would do. And life didn't work out that way, but I agreed with my dad. We didn't want to sell the farm, but there was just this problem there, and it took me a long time to kind of get over that. But I never forgot that property goes up in value over time. And then when I was getting started with real estate, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he mentioned the same fact. And then I read Why in the book The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you ever have any doubts about the government planning to quit printing money, read The Creature from Jekyll Island, and they will put all your doubts about that fact quite to rest. So my point is, if we just latch on to a property, let's say we're working a job, and we just managed to buy a property, no money down or whatever, just even 20% down if you have it, but get your hands on a property, nothing else changes, you keep your job, you keep your business, you keep your whatever, you keep your farm running. Over time, it is a fact that the property will increase in value. Here's a slide that I think Parker shared this with the median price in Lancaster County. This is right here. This is not Timbuktu. This is not some exotic foreign country. This is not on the West Coast. This is right here in Lancaster County. In 2015, the median price was whatever it is, slightly below 200, and now it's almost double, 194%. What's missing, and I'm not sure why Parker did this, maybe it's the realtor in him, but what's missing is let's say the 8 years before that were pretty much flat, right? So what that tells you is that over a 20-year period, the property's essentially doubled in value. And that has been a historical pattern going back to 1913. So if you simply take this one piece and forget everything else, you will be motivated to latch onto a property that you can tuck to the side and just kind of have on the side, appreciating as you do your job. The reason that I think part of the reason that I have developed a liking to rental properties is this dilemma that my dad shared with me when I asked him about the farm. So we had this big run up in value, right? And the farm was worth $500,000. We owed $200,000, but we couldn't touch the cash. That bothered me. So I decided when I get big, I'm going to buy more property than I need, and when the price goes up, I'm going to sell some, and then I can have all the cash to whatever, pay the bills and whatever. It actually works. Trust me, it does. And I think that's part of the reason that I have today more properties than I really need, is because I just decided that when I get big, I'm gonna do that. so I feel like, yeah, I feel like as Christians, we have an unfair advantage. We're always aware, and we believe in a better future. So if we're going through a tough time, we can keep the faith. We keep on believing in a better future. We know that whatever we're facing now is temporary, and that allows us to keep believing. And I think that's something in the heart of every entrepreneur, is we believe in a better future. And I feel that as a real estate investor, we also have an unfair advantage. That unfair advantage is quite simply that the price of real estate will go up over time. There's a lot of ways to kind of mess that up or whatever and not take advantage of it, but the government will not quit printing money. And if you want to understand why or how that works, read The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. I read this book 3 times, and every time I was done reading it, I went out and I bought more real estate. And the reason is because the government has this addiction to printing money. Like, printing money is how they fix problems. And I don't really think that's a good idea necessarily, but what it does mean for me, and what it means for you, is that there will be more dollars chasing the same assets, and that means people will pay more dollars for the same asset down the road. It's that simple, and if you forget everything else, just remember that with time, property values tend to go up. Another thing that I like about this chart here is there's a verse in the Bible that says, it rains on the righteous and the unrighteous. And I'm going to really take some liberties here. I'm going to paraphrase that. And I'm going to tell everyone in the room that the property values go up for the smart people and the unsmart people. It's all the same. And for proof of that, I have no truck, no car. I just bought my first trailer last week. It's a dump trailer. I have no computer, no smartphone, no cell phone. And I'll tell you, real estate doesn't really care. I'm not saying that you got to live your life that way. I'm saying I choose to do it. But I will tell you that real estate doesn't care, and it goes up in value anyhow. So remember that you don't really have to be smart to take advantage of this printing of money or whatever it is. And just remember that the values go up for the smart and the unsmart and everybody in between. So if you're feeling like, I'm smart, that's cool, go buy some real estate. If you're feeling like, well, I'm not really that smart, that's okay too, just go buy some real estate, and it'll there'll come a day when you'll probably be glad that that you did that. All right, so jumping into the owner financing, I've had a lot of questions. How does that really work? What does that look like? And right there it is. So we have some handouts here. If I could get a hand here to just put some out. I think we printed about 100, so there should be plenty to go around here. If you can just get some out there. These are your bonus for coming out live. Yeah, just get them spread out. These are for you to take home and kind of incorporate into your next seller financing presentation. So why would a seller do seller financing? And we mentioned about the tax savings. So let's look at a situation here where they do no seller financing. The price is $400,000, and they're going to pay 6% realtor fees, and they net out of that $376, and then they have depreciated the property to almost nothing. In this case, $25,000. So their taxable income is approximately $351,000. They pay a total tax of $68,000, leaving a net of $307,265. Not bad, because they probably bought the property for like $100,000 or whatever. But for people that are red-blooded American and do not like to pay tax, that $68,000 tends to bother them. And that's where we come in and we say you really don't have to pay that tax if you don't want to, or you can at least reduce it. Definitely talk to your CPA. This is just an example. I'm not a licensed realtor, not a licensed CPA, so you got to run everything by your own CPA to confirm here. But what I believe is the current year capital gains brackets is 0% for 47,000, 15% up to 291, and then from 291 on up, you're taxed at 20%. So what that means is, if you have a large sale, the larger the purchase price, the more of your gain will be taxed at 20%, which is the higher rate. So if you can simply break up that purchase price money into a couple different years and keep it all in the 0 to 15%, you're going to save the sellers a lot of money. So in this case, the taxes that the property owner will need to pay, if you do a $400,000 sale price with a tax basis of $25,000, these people were insisting on some money down, and so I guess I went to my landlord or whoever and borrowed the money, and their tax basis is $25,000, so that means they don't have to pay tax on the first $25,000 they get. They only have to pay tax on $15,000, and their total tax savings in year one are $66,000. Now that's not like forever. When I do give them the money, they'll have to pay some tax. But what that does mean, and here's where sellers really get worked up, is it means there's $66,000 that they are not paying to Uncle Sam, that if they let in the property, they can charge me interest for. Okay, get that. That means they're getting free money. So they're getting, in this case, they negotiated 6% that they wanted to get for their interest rate, and they are getting 6% on 66,000. For some reason, 3,900 doesn't seem right, but that's the number that's up there. But take that times 5, and it means that because they lent to me and did seller financing, over 5 years they made almost 20 grand in free money. That's without the interest that they generate off of the money that is not tax savings. That's where they really just lose control. They're like, wow. Here's a really powerful component. So I present this, and they're maybe like not sure about it. We go over it twice, and I'm like, you know what, just think about it. Call your CPA, run it by him. And they're like, yeah, I'll do that. They call their CPA, and like, they call me, and I'm like, okay, so when are you looking at with your CPA? And they're saying Wednesday afternoon. Oh, okay, cool. So you'll get back with me maybe like Thursday or something? Yeah, we'll probably be back with you in Thursday or Friday. And guess what? Guess what happens? Wednesday afternoon, 3:30 p.m., right after their 2:30 appointment. They're like, Eli, I think it's a go. It seems to make sense. Our CPA recommended it. So you have a third-party professional that's not me, somebody they know and trust and have worked with for years, highly recommending scenario 2. At that point, it's a lock, and it's just, they get really excited. The last one I did, I just bought on a really great block of the city, Walnut Street, and this lady, she kept asking questions to the point of, where's the catch? She was, I think, way more eager to get the deal done than I was. And she has 6 properties. I'm not saying. But the point is, she was simply in a different place than I am. Her husband died, And that lead got generated from a letter that I sent to a landlord list. Yes, go ahead. Almost. What's that address right now? If I can't remember, it's okay. I can't share what I don't remember. But she was in a different place than I was. I wasn't taking advantage of her or anything like that. She was benefiting from selling to us. But the lead was generated by a letter we had sent out 6 years ago. And she said, Eli, I don't know what it was about your letter, but I liked you when I got the letter. And I got all kinds of letters since then, but I just threw them in the trash. So sometimes you just do things and it work out, and I don't even really know what was in the letter, but apparently I wasn't a hard sell, or like I was just putting it out there. But she likes me now, and we're definitely having a great relationship. She likes our monthly checks, and she likes seeing what we did to the property. It was her and her adult daughter who kind of ran the place, and we're good at what we do. And she kind of struggled with some of the stuff that needed done. She didn't feel like spending the money, didn't know who to get to do it, and we went in there and John Mark, you did the rehab. Don't share that address, please. And she liked it. She drives by the property and she's like, I like that black door. I can't believe such a simple thing just made that property look so great. And that just creates the warm and fuzzies. She knows I care about the property, and she feels good to know that it's in good hands. Now we're going to go to, I'm not sure where we're at here. There we go. Okay, the first example was the single owner. So a couple notes to take away here. The brackets are here in the bottom corner. They're quite different for single filers versus married filers. And the big takeaway I get from that is there are many advantages to being married. Tax benefits are just one, obviously, but so that's just an example with a married couple. Their savings are not going to be quite as much because the brackets are higher. You can see that on your handouts there. By the way, if there's anyone that's listening on the phone and is not here tonight, and you would like to see a handout of these owner financing examples and numbers, you can call my assistant Josiah, and he will be happy to mail you one. Josiah's number is 717-342-8291. Again, 717-342-8291, and Josiah will be happy to mail you the 3-page handout that breaks down the numbers on owner financing versus not owner financing. Okay, so that's with, this example here is with a married couple, and then we'll get serious. If I could just remember how to do this thing. And we'll go with a property that has $1 million sale price, all right? So if you think somebody that sells a property that's getting sold at $250 is motivated to save on taxes, what do you think happens when you have $1 million property? At that point, it gets really, really serious. Their tax savings on the first year are $198,230. That's how much money they would have to pay to Uncle Sam if they did a cash deal. And selling to me, they can save $198,230. On that $198,000 at 6% interest, they can generate an additional $11,894 per year. Take that times 5, and they just generated free $59,000 in free money. Like, that money would have not been generated if they would have given the $198,000 to Uncle Sam. We actually did a scenario very similar to that in one of our examples. So that is some very serious motivation, folks. Even if you have a seller that has a property that you think this is too big for me, maybe the tax savings are big enough that you can work something out. They can get pretty motivated when they are looking at potentially a $200,000 tax bill. All right, so moving on to some real life examples here. This was our very second flip. The first one Jake talked a little bit about, but this was our second one, and nothing glamorous here. This is just a small row home in Mannheim, and we had just flipped our first house, and we had put all of our money into it plus the lender's money, and this property came available down the street and around the corner, and I was like, I think we can make money on this one too, but I had no money. So I went to my lender for the first house, and I told him about this deal here. At that point, we had house one under agreement, and I guess he liked my hustle, and he said, I will lend you all the money. I didn't know Jeff Moeller back then, but today Jeff Moeller would do the same thing. If you find the right deal at the right price, you can get a hard money loan and still do a no money down flip. The one note that I would like to point out on flips, especially for beginning investors, you have to look at your numbers. What I see a lot of people getting tripped up on is if you're at an auction or otherwise competing in a general bidding opportunity, you'll go up against experienced investors, and you'll be like, well, if Chad Hurst can bid 200, I can too. And that's true, except that Chad Hurst won't have that $20,000 interest bill. And I see that not getting properly accounted for in beginning investors' mindset when they go bid against other investors that maybe don't have a hard money loan. And so that's just something that I think can be a component to some of these young investors are wondering why they're getting tripped up, why they're not making money, and it's a little bit of hard work to dissect that and to break it down. But one of the things that I see quite a bit is they're not accurately accounting for their high interest. Like, they just gloss over it because they're like, well, Chad Hurst can pay that, then I can too, because I have a better rehab team than he does, or whatever. And it's something you got to watch out for. Look at your numbers, run your numbers, and bid accordingly. So on this zero down flip, we made $12,000. That was back in 2010. So that would be kind of like $25,000 today. That was a huge win for us, and it proved to me that flipping houses is a way that we can actually move the needle, and we can create a better future for our family. So that was a very exciting project, and a no money down project. This one here was purchased in 2014. That is 14 townhomes. I was shaking in my knees when I did this. I have no problems admitting that. It was way out of my league. I had no business chasing it down, but I did anyway because the seller offered, well, we negotiated, I guess, a deal that was too hard for me to walk away from. So let me show you a little bit how that went. So this connection was made through a handyman of mine that had helped me with managing some of my rentals, doing miscellaneous repairs. He had also done handyman work at this property, and the owner was an old widow who was tired of dealing with the drama and the tenants and the maintenance. And I was at my flip project at 123 North Cedar Street in Lidditz, working away, just working hard. And Scott walked in there and plopped a bunch of paperwork on the desk or on the countertop, and he said, here's the appraisal for Ann Road. Sandy is ready to sell. And I'm like, okay. So he had told me about the property before, and I was like, 14 units, it's just way out of my league. And he said, yep, she wants to sell to you. It's appraised at 1.2, but she's willing to sell for 1.1 because she doesn't have to pay a realtor and whatever. And I said, okay. So he said, yeah, give her a call. And so I did, even though I was like, there's there's no way this is going to work out. But I said, I'll look at it. And that's kind of a dangerous thing to do in the real estate world, but I did anyhow. So we went and looked at it, and I knew my only shot at buying this was seller financing. I could not get a bank loan for whatever, $850,000. And I'm not saying I couldn't have came up with the down money at that point, but it would have all been borrowed. So it would have been really difficult. So how this negotiation, if you want to call it that, went was, it was all about price, right? She said, I want 1.1 million, no less, and I want the cash, or if I let the money in, you need to pay 8%. And that was at a time when the market rate was like 5 3/4 or 6, thereabouts, 6 max, I would guess, maybe 5.5, whatever, 2014, whatever the rates were then. And I said, well, I can pay your 1.1 because I really wanted the property. I said, you let the money in, I'll pay 1.1, I'll pay you full price. And I said, as far as interest, you know, market rate is, I forget. If it was 5, I said 5. If it was 5.5, I said 5.5. I said, that's, you know, what the numbers could work at for me. I said, the rents don't support 8%, and I'm not going to pay you 8%. And her brother was involved in the deal as well, and not as an owner, but as a negotiator. And he had sold me a 6-unit, which lent a little bit of credibility to me. So he said, yep, she can get 8% at a municipal bond, tax-free. And I said, that's fine. But I said, only on what she gets. And I went through of how she would pay, I think it was slightly over $200,000. It was very similar to the 1 million example that we had seen. And I said that 8% on what is left over is equivalent to about 6.5, with her getting 6.5 on everything. And I ran the numbers, put them down on paper, and they said, oh, okay. Well, I guess we could let you get to 7. There's no way you're getting it at 6, you know. And I said, okay. And so we settled at 7.5%, if I remember right. Or did I say 7? I forget. It's starting to get a little blurry there. But 7 or 7.5% was the interest rate. And so I was like, okay. There was one thing we didn't talk about, and that's down money. So we kind of got it over to the title company. We got within like 2 weeks of closing, and I said, Eli, you have to be a man and figure this out. If she wants 10% down, you need to know it now, because you don't want to find that out the day before settlement. And she was old school. I thought she might lean towards 10% instead of 20, because 20 was the more modern standard. There was a time in the early 2000s where 10% down was kind of standard, and at that time it was 20. And I said, you got to figure this out. So I called Sandy. I said, hey, Sandy, it's time for our final pre-settlement walkthrough. Can we meet at the property and get the final details figured out? She said, yep. So we figured out a time. I met her. We did a walkthrough at 1 or 2 of the units. And I said, well, Sandy, I said, this is your lucky day. Everything checks out. And, you know, the properties are in similar condition. There's nothing crazy that, you know, that I wasn't aware of before. So the deal is on. Let's go to settlement. I said, and this is where I'm not sure what my knees were doing, but it was probably something like this. I said, we didn't really talk about down money. I said, but when I go buy a flip property, I will generally put down like 500 or sometimes 1,000. I said, this here is a bit bigger. I think bit was maybe kind of generous. I said, this here is a bit bigger. So I didn't know, did you want like 1,000 down or maybe 2,000? I'll take the 2,000, she said. So I literally went to my, I don't know if I ran over, but I went to my taxi driver's vehicle, got my checkbook out of my briefcase, and on the hood of her car wrote her a $2,000 check, and that was her deposit. Everything else was financed. The purchase price there was 1.1 million, so she would have financed 1,098,000 at, I believe it was 7% for 5 years. And we worked hard at the property, got the rents boosted, and worked hard at flipping, so got my creditworthiness in better shape. And 3 years in, we refinanced with Lanco Credit Union, and she was completely fine with cashing out early. She didn't care about taxes or whatever. She just, whenever it was good for me, she was good. She wanted the money. And at the settlement table, she cried and she said, my husband would be so proud of me. She had this like $1 million check, right? He would be so proud of me. And Eli, it was such a pleasure working with you. And that just felt good, that she wanted to, that she felt appreciated. And that was one of the, it was just a very rewarding experience. And I think you would find it likewise if you work with some seller financing deals. They are genuinely appreciative of you doing good business with them. And as a winner, that's what we will do. And again, the lead came not necessarily from me, but just from a handyman who I associated with and who knew that I buy properties. I'm not bashful about that fact, so I would encourage everyone to put that out there yourself. This next deal was a 4-unit townhome that we purchased in 2011, and that one I had bought a 2-unit from the seller about a year before this, and he was getting ready to build 48 units in Ephrata, and I guess just wanted to get rid of some of his older units. These were about 20 years old at that point, and I said, okay, I would like to buy the properties because I remembered that property values generally will double in 20 years. And interestingly enough, he wanted $490,000 for these 4 townhomes. And it was easy math. I said, all right, so we're at 490, take it times 2, that's pretty much $1 million. And 20 years later, the properties will be paid down, hopefully. And that, I remember I looked at this property on Saturday. This was 2011, so I was investing for about a year at that point. And I ran the numbers 2 or 3 times, and I said, I know there's like no cash flow here, but if I buy these properties and they double in 20 years and they're paid down, so that means little farmer boy Eli will be a millionaire. And that just fried my brain. It just fried my brain. I couldn't believe it. But the numbers just came out the same every single time. And I remember where church was the following day, and I don't remember what the sermon was about, but I remember where I was sitting. I do. Listen, folks, this is not rocket science. The government will print more money. Here a short, 14, 15 years later, the doubling has already occurred. The paid off has not. It's kind of my bad, but anyway, the doubling has happened. And I have taken a liking to townhomes for maintenance reasons and also because we can find good quality tenants. When we bought this, the top rent was $950. Currently, the top rent is $1,895, and I think the minimum is $1,795. So at this point, they're also cash flowing. And we are very grateful for the seller for getting us into those properties. This one here, I was connected through church. I'm not bashful about what I do, and sometimes that's a good thing, maybe sometimes not a good thing, but generally it's a good thing. And how it happened was, I was at church one day, and there was this older church guy. He talks a lot, and I guess I do too, so I kind of have a feeling for him. But he was telling about how he sold his business to his son, and I'm like, okay, so he sells his business to his son. He's dad, so he probably played the bank, right? And this is just me thinking at church. I don't know if that's okay or not, but he was talking, I was thinking, and he said, yeah, he said, it's a big loan he got from the bank. I don't know. I hope he can make the payments. And I said to myself, he got a bank loan. Got a bank loan. That means Dad got the money. So 3 days later, I was at his doorstep. And we hammered out a deal where he would lend me $280,000 to go buy some rentals in Indiana. And I didn't have a banking relationship out there, and I wanted to buy some properties out there. So he lent me $280,000 and received interest checks very regularly from there on at the first of the month. A couple short years later, he called me and he said, "Hey, Eli, I have these 5 townhomes, and I just am tired of them." Can you imagine that? I'm just tired of them. They were 20 years old, and he had a manager, kind of, but any repairs that needed done, he hired a driver to take him and his work trailer out to the jobs, and he took a half or a full day off work to go fix his tenants' maintenance issues. This was a multi-millionaire, right? I think only in Lancaster County they would act like that. But he had an experience that totally put him over the top. Are you ready for this? Such a disaster. In this 20-year-old townhome, he said, "This never happened. No, this should not be." He said, the tenants had a leak in their laundry room by the washer. You know, they didn't call me and they didn't tighten it, and it just dripped. He said, I had to replace the whole floor. It was like 10 by 12, right? And he said, "Sist too feel. Ich brauche nicht mit das." So he said, "All right, Eli, do you want to buy them?" And at that point, this was 2015, I had just taken on Ann Road, and I said, "I don't know. I mean, I like the properties, but if I like the properties, but if I buy them, boy, I'm really going to be maxing myself out on lender, what is it, the ratio. Like, I was maxed out already. The bankers were kind of talking and saying, Eli, you should maybe settle down a little bit and flip some more houses. And here he wanted to sell them to me, and I said, Levi, I said, I generally will get a discount when I buy properties, and I don't feel right offering you 80% of what you're asking here. I said, it just doesn't seem to be a good match. And so we kind of let it go for half a year, and he had another tenant turnover or some unpleasant experience, and he says, Eli, I really want to sell these properties. My realtor tells me I could get about $130 per unit, and if I didn't have to pay a realtor, I could sell them to you for $110. He said, I'm done with it. I don't want to have my tenants I don't want to expose them to the market and have my tenants disturbed. Like, I just want it simple. And I said, well, Levi, I said, the banks wouldn't like it. And he said, Eli, he said, I don't want the money. Would you buy them if I left all the money in? I said, at what interest rate? And he said, what do you need? I said, 4% for 10 years, and I'll do it. He said, okay, it's a done deal. So we bought these properties for zero down, 10-year note, 20-year amortization. So we're actually marginally cash flowing on them. And it's been a short ride because as of, I think, next January, we're going to need to get a bank loan on them unless they want to extend. But that was a situation where it was purely relationship-based. He knew I'm dependable for the monthly payment. He knew I'd take good care of properties. He knew that he's dealing with a winner. All right? So let's remember that and choose to be a winner every day. This one here was more recent. This was a 4-unit that was brought to me by a wholesaler. He, whoops, it's 8:30 already. So I'll make it quick. There was a wholesaler brought me this property. He was getting ready to move out of the area, had done seller financing on multiple properties from this owner. The owner liked the seller financing deals, how they worked, how they saved him taxes, wanted to do owner financing, but this wholesaler I call him a wholesaler. He was more of a landlord investor. But this property here, he said, I don't want it because I don't want to do the maintenance. I'm moving to Berks. And he called me because he knew that I'm a winner and that I can be depended on for the first of the month payment. And he said, would you buy this property from this seller for me? And I said, yeah, sure. So he got a $10,000 wholesale fee. This was back when that was still legal. And the seller here wanted some money down, and I didn't want to put money into it. So I called Jeff Moeller, and he found me a second mortgage lender who made it a no money down deal. The cash flow is, even 2 years later, is negative because it's totally lent out. But this was a more of like an equity play, and my strategy is to, when the interest rates drop to around 6%, I will do a bank refi, and at that point, everything will probably cash flow a little better, and we will be in good shape all around. This one here was 309 Cherry. Bought that owner financing from, are you ready for this? A 90-year-old seller. He did not want to pay taxes. And we did the deal. This is like 2019. In 2020, the interest rates dropped. I said, Elwood, I'm going to get a bank loan for 3.5%. There was no prepayment penalty. I said, I'm going to get a bank loan and pay you off. I mean, you're kind of old anyway, so you'd probably be okay with that, right? And he just about had a meltdown. He said, Eli, I don't want to pay taxes. I would have to pay $15,000 in taxes if you paid me off. And I said, really? Yeah, he said, what would I have to do to not make you pay me off? I said, match the bank rate. And I said, and he said, for how long? I said, 10 years. He said, that's okay. I said, Elwood, you won't be around in 10 years. He said, that's okay too, because then my kids can't just spend the money. They'll be getting regular monthly payments. And I was like, this is a little messed up, but I agreed to it. There's a thing called elder abuse, and I wanted to make sure that I do not get accused of this. So I recorded the rate change and the 10-year rate lock with his notarized signature to prove that he is of sound mind when we did this. 18 months later, I get a call from his daughter saying, Dad passed. Can you pay off the loan? I said, in 8.5 years, I can. And she said, really? And so she got a little testy, and I explained how the situation was, how Dad did not want to pay taxes. And she said, yeah, that would be something Dad would do. So she had her attorney check it out. Everything was legit. I did actually make them a buyout offer. I simply accounted the difference I would have to pay in interest for a bank loan. At that point, it was 8.5%. It came out to like a $25,000 discount. I explained it exactly what would happen and where that number came in. And she said, nope, we'll keep the money. At that point, it was kind of okay. They had processed it. And I had offered them a cash out. It just, because of the interest rate increase, it just wasn't really favorable to them at that time. So now I'm the one that has a dilemma. This property is worth $240. I owe $78, and I can't sell it. It's a big problem. Because if I did, I would lose a 3.5% loan. This one here we bought from a wholesaler. The point here was he negotiated, I don't know what he said, but he negotiated a 7-year term at 2%. Remember, when you're dealing with sellers, you determine what the terms are. It's all what the seller and you agree to. At that point, the sellers were looking at like a 1-point-something CD, and they seen 2% as quite acceptable. And they wanted to move out of town, and Columbia was not appealing to them anymore. That was not me that negotiated that. I should probably call him and see how he got that 2%, but the point is there that that terms are very negotiable. It's whatever you and the seller decide. All right, just to recap, no money down options: the BRRRR method, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, owner financing, and the other one is the appreciation thing, where you buy a rental, let the property appreciate, do a cash out refi, take that money and buy another property. We are pretty much past our time here, so thank you for putting up with me as I go over. And a couple things to note: there are a few books for sale at the back. Success Habits of Superachievers. It's like the Chicken Soup for the Soul book. They only gave me 3 pages to write my story. It's on page 267, I think. And there are some good words of wisdom there in the back. The books are $20 each. Some great advice there that I would hate for you to miss just because you don't buy the book. So go buy the book, and there are some free calendars, and for the people that like to look into the future, there are some free calendars. For the people that like to plan ahead, there are some 2026 planners. So those are free, and we have some recommended reading here. Where's that? There we go. Recommended reading, books that have helped me understand a little bit better about myself and also how to work well with others. We do have an open position on our work crew at this time. There's some help wanted flyers in the back, so feel free to take those if you happen to be looking for a job right now. And that's really about all I have. Hopefully you gathered something here tonight that you can learn from. And in closing, stay humble, stay hungry, and remember that you are a winner.
Very good. Thanks so much, Eli. That was a lot. Hopefully got something out of that you can be inspired by, or I'm even just like some of those strategies. I'm just amazed at how you had so many different examples of those conversations with sellers, and I'm sure there's many, many more examples of people that some of you guys have probably had, and it's really fun. Too many times we assume that what matters the most to someone is money, and it's just not nearly always the case, as you know, your examples have kind of proved. I bet at least some of you, when Eli was talking about the chart of properties doubling in 20 years, just a real quick note on this, but it's important to remember. Probably at least some of you are sitting there thinking, yeah, but 20 years is a long time. I mean, it's hard to get excited about something and work hard today and sacrifice for something today for something in 20 years from now, right? The younger you are, the more that is true. But here's a simple truth. The time is going to pass anyway. You might as well get yourself some real estate. Like Eli said, he's got some books and stuff in the back. Take a look at that stuff. Real quick before we wrap up. Next month, I think it's October the 1st, maybe, whatever the date is, first Wednesday night in October, we're having Jason Serrano come back. Jason spoke at our meeting, I think a little over a year ago. He is a friend of mine from Harrisburg. He comes at his perspective in the world of real estate. He comes at it from a very different angle. He is the CEO of a big real estate investment trust, a big REIT. It's a $5 billion REIT that he's the CEO of. They used to be called New York Mortgage Trust. They actually just changed their name. If you look them up on the Robinhood or wherever you look at stocks, their new name is Adamus. It's ADAMUS, I think it is. He just has a very unique perspective on finance and economics and risk management, managing such a large portfolio of wealth. So, and that meeting will not be recorded. Most of the time we do record the meetings, but he's a high-level player, and we do not record the meetings when he speaks. So just a quick note on that. With that, we're going to wrap it up. Again, take a look at some stuff on the table in the back. I'm sure you'll all be hanging out here for a while. So thank you for coming out, and we'll see you back here next month.